Whether or not you shop at Tesco, you'll probably know about its Clubcard membership scheme. In recent years, it's given users of the service access to lower prices, but only if you're aged 18 or over. Now, we don't think that's fair, but it could be about to change. Welcome to Which Money. Hello, it's James in the Which studio, and alongside me this week, I've got senior researcher Ellie Simmonds. Ellie, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Now, I know it was half term last week and you were off. For you deal with kind of shopping and retail on a day-to-day basis. Do you actually like shopping? Did you do any shopping last week? Or
I don't actually like shopping for pleasure, no.
you don't? It's a bit like a busman's holiday, I guess, isn't it? You don't get much
bit.
Pleasure from it.
That's true. I can't go shopping like a normal person, though, I have to say. I was in Tesco last week looking at unit pricing and seeing how it was inconsistent, so I can't see prices like a normal person.
You just can't switch off. I guess. No. I remember we were chatting to Faye a couple of weeks ago, and it was funny because she deals with kind of fraud on a day-to-day basis, and then she was a victim of fraud, and it's almost like you guys can't switch off from these kind of things because they just follow you around.
That's right, exactly.
Now, I mentioned Tesco at the start, and the reason I mentioned it is because really recently, in the past couple of weeks or so, there's been some big news from Tesco specifically about Clubcard. We'll do the backstory in a second, but what is the headline? What's the big news that's just happened?
So the news is that Tesco is reviewing its Clubcard policy and aims to open it up to under 18s. So all those teenagers that at the moment and for the last few years haven't been able to access the lower prices at Tesco through its Clubcard scheme should soon be able to access them.
Which is very good news because this is something that we here at Which have been banging on about for a very long time, right?
That's right, yeah. I remember being in the studio talking about it a few months ago with you.
So take us back then, because Clubcard, we all know Clubcard at Tesco, that's been going for a very long time, but Clubcard prices is a bit newer and a bit different. So how does that exactly work?
Yeah, so Clubcard prices came in, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe they were trialled slightly longer ago than that, but they've been around roughly 5 or 6 years, and they've grown in size and kind of depth, if you like. The idea is that there's 2 levels of pricing, and that if you have a Tesco Clubcard, you get lower prices on some stuff compared to somebody who doesn't have a Tesco Clubcard. So it used to be, before Clubcard prices came in, that Tesco would have lots of general discounts. So it would be, was this price now this price, multi-buys on things, lots of different discounts that were accessible to everybody. And slowly it moved away from those types of general discounts onto these Clubcard discounts that were similar in kind of style, but only accessible to those with a Clubcard.
So it's these, you see all these banners, don't you? The yellow and blue stickers and whatnot that sort of draw you in because that price looks great. And then you think, if you're not a Clubcard member, you think, well, surely I'm just going to have a Clubcard because that price just draws you in. You almost don't have any standard offers anymore.
That's right. And you get a hit at the checkout. When you go to the checkout, anyone that's shopped in Tesco will know you get there and it says some huge price. And then you hand over your Clubcard and it knocks a decent chunk off it, and you get a kind of a bit of a dopamine hit. You're like, oh, wow, I've saved that much just purely through signing up to the loyalty scheme.
And it can be on a whole range of products as well, can't it? I guess it might be on TVs and tech and that kind of thing, but also just small stuff like a meal deal, for example. Yeah. Loads of products across the store are reduced if you do have the Clubcard, right?
Yeah, that's right. Although, interestingly, you'll find that Tesco Clubcard prices are more common on kind of discretionary purchases. So you won't tend to get them on your milk and your everyday bread or things like that. You will tend to get them more on the things that you could do without. So your crisps and your fizzy drinks and your nice treats, things like that. And
I know people often kind of query about these kinds of things where the scheme is free to join, but you get a discount from it. It's free at the point of entry, but you are giving away your data. I guess that is kind of the payoff for being a Clubcard member. Tesco get a whole lot of data about you and can try and personalise things for you and that kind of thing. Is that kind of the trade-off?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So like with anything, there's no such thing as a free lunch, is there? And similarly, there's no such thing as a free discounted grocery. So what happens is you have the Clubcard, they ring it through when you do your shop. They know exactly what you've bought, where you've bought it, how much you've spent, whether you've paid by cash or card. They know a whole load of stuff about you. And then they can use that data to help them market products better. And they also anonymise that data and group it together and sell it on to the big brands and other marketing companies to help them understand how they can sell products better.
So going back to the news earlier this month, I've got the statement. It was quite a short statement, at least from what I read. It said Tesco is actively reviewing Tesco Clubcard with the intention of making Clubcard available to under 18s this year. That was the extent of the statement. Remind us why we have been going on about this for quite a while. Why is it so contentious that under 18s can't have a Clubcard?
So it's really contentious. We haven't thought it's fair here at Which for a very long time, because what it's basically doing is making those under 18s pay more for their groceries than other people. And actually, these are people who probably, in the most part, don't have as much money as older people either. So it seems massively unfair. These discounts, like I said, were available to everybody a few years ago, and now they're only available to the people with the Clubcard, which excludes under 18s. So actually, in terms of what under 18s are paying at Tesco nowadays compared to a few years ago, it's a huge amount more because they can't access the discounts that they used to be able to access because they're now locked away behind Clubcard.
And, we've covered this on the podcast before. We've covered it on the website, in the magazine, on social media as well. And listeners and viewers and readers have often kind of queried, why don't people just lie about their age, or why don't they just use their parents' Clubcard? That's besides the point, right?
It is besides the point. I mean, it's not that simple. I mean, you have to access the Clubcard to start with. You have to get it. There's lots of teenagers who, just pop into a Tesco on their way to and from school to buy a meal deal, to buy a snack. And it isn't fair that they pay more money than everybody else. It just seems really unfair. And I think it's one of those things that I don't think you'd ever design it like that intentionally, but the outcome of it is that under 18s have been paying an awful lot more for these groceries than other people for many years now.
And do we know why? Is it just a case of, the Tesco might have felt 18 was the right number and didn't necessarily think of what the consequences might have been?
It's hard to say. We don't really know why, if I'm honest. I suspect that some of it was they launched Clubcard prices under their Clubcard scheme, and then the pricing strategy was so successful, I suspect, that then they rolled it out in a much wider way without really thinking about the fact that the Clubcard scheme was only available to over 18s. We've also heard talk in the past about being data protection issues and things like that, but there are plenty of retailers that do allow under 18s access to their loyalty scheme, so I'm not sure that justification holds water. So it's not clear, essentially. And
do we know why Tesco have now come out? Is it because of the pressure that we have been putting them under?
Well, we'd like to think so. Definitely they've come under quite a lot of pressure. We've been talking about this issue for several years now, and we have done our absolute best to make the bosses at Tesco listen to us. And we've really tried to put forward the views of under 18s. We've twice withheld a Which recommended provider status from Tesco over this issue for 2 years running. We have put pressure on Tesco in social media. We've asked our supporters and our readers and our listeners to tweet Tesco or to kind of tag it on social media to say they don't think it's fair. We've talked about it in many podcasts. We've talked about it in lots of our magazine articles and online articles. And we've also written a joint letter to the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, alongside a couple of other organisations, the children's charity Barnardo's and the Co-op, to put pressure on Tesco over this issue. So we've done our absolute utmost to make them listen, and now they have.
And it looks like the pressure has worked. We don't have any sense of when the change might happen. It's just sort of still under review, isn't it, from Tesco?
Yeah, they just said this year, which could be any time.
But good news nonetheless. Some people might wonder why we're only focusing on Tesco, because I had a little look, and Lidl, Morrisons, Sainsbury's and Waitrose all have age restrictions on their membership scheme as well. So why only Tesco?
That's right. So Tesco is a bit of a different case. To start with, it is the largest supermarket in the UK. It has the largest market share, so its sheer size means it's the biggest. And it also has a huge number of loyalty prices. So it's not just that it's got a loyalty scheme, it's that so many, basically all of its discounts are locked behind Clubcard, which means its restrictions have the biggest impact on people. Some of those other supermarkets do things slightly differently. For example, Lidl has similar restrictions, but it has very few loyalty prices. The same with Waitrose. So it's a smaller market share for both of them, far, far fewer loyalty prices. Sainsbury's does have an 18 policy, but younger teenagers can sign up on a parent's account, which they can't at Tesco. So there are various other kind of Tesco is a bit of an outlier in terms of that.
And we track prices every month for supermarket shops. At least you do anyway, as part of your day job, don't you? And it does add up if you have a club card or not, because something you'd written on the website suggests that not having a club card, you may pay 8% more than if you do have a club card. So it shows that it does add up. Other restrictions too with the club card. Another one is not having a fixed address. You can't get a club card. Any changes with that yet?
Not that we've heard of, no. So yeah, fixed address and not with the club card, but with some of the other schemes, there's also digital access requirements. So with Lidl, for example, you need to be able to download an app to access their loyalty discounts.
So despite these concerns that we have raised, which sound like and definitely are legitimate concerns, would we still advise people to get a club card or get join a loyalty scheme for a supermarket?
I think it's one of those things. If you shop at that shop already and you're happy to hand over your data in exchange for discounts, then yeah, you can get some good discounts. And I think it's worth doing. I wouldn't shop at a shop purely because of its loyalty scheme, because I don't think you'll get necessarily a better deal. But if you shop at that shop anyway, then joining its loyalty scheme is likely to give you some decent discounts, but only do it if you're happy with the data trade-off. And also if you can, which is the whole point of the campaigning we've done on this issue over the last few years.
Absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that from Tesco, won't we, and find out when it happens at some point this year.
Absolutely. And we'll also be putting pressure on some of the other supermarkets too to follow suit, because there's plenty more. While Tesco is the biggest by far and with the most harm to those who can't access it, there are plenty of other things the other supermarkets can do too, and it would be great to see them follow Tesco's lead.
So hopefully it's like a domino effect. We get the big one to begin with, and then all the others sort of follow suit.
That would be great, yeah.
Fingers crossed. We'll keep an eye out. But as we're talking about that, it almost seems right to talk about something that you've written for the new magazine, which I have here, something that you wrote called The Best and Worst Supermarkets, because as we do every year, we do this, don't we? We try and find out what the best supermarkets and the worst supermarkets are, according to which members and shoppers, right?
Yes, that's right. Well, according to all shoppers across the UK, yeah.
And one thing I'm going to pick up straight away, because I heard you mention it before, in terms of a which recommended provider supermarket, Tesco does not make the list. Quickly remind us why?
It doesn't, because of its Clubcard restrictions. So actually the day before we went to press with our magazine article was the day that Tesco announced it was reviewing its restrictions, but we still wouldn't want to give it a which recommended provider award until we've actually seen those restrictions in place and seen what they look like in practice.
So what you're saying is it performs well across the board according to customers, but it just lets itself down because of those restrictions.
Exactly.
So take us through then. So take us through some of this research. How does the research work? Because I think that's quite interesting before we get to the winners and losers.
Yeah, so we do a big survey, 3,500 members of the public. We ask them the nitty-gritty on their supermarket shopping habits. We ask them where they've shopped over the past year. We ask them to rate different areas of their experience. So, how long it takes to queue, what the store looks like, what the self-scanning checkouts are like, what the products are like, whether they taste good, whether the quality is good, whether they're fresh, what the range is like, and also value for money and customer service as well. So we ask them, and when it comes to online, what the deliveries are like and the slot availability and the delivery drivers. So we ask them kind of everything we can think of really about their shopping experience.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like there's any element that you've left off the list there, really. Should we do in-store supermarket performance first? We'll do online in a second, because I guess that's still a huge growing market, isn't it?
Yeah.
So for in-store, who tops the list? Which stores are the best?
Yeah, so in-store, Marks and Spencer's is the best. It does really well. It's top of the table. It does brilliantly across the board for everything, really, except for value for money, where it gets a relatively poor rating. So it does brilliantly, but, as people will probably not be too surprised that the prices do kind of put people off slightly.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too surprising that the price is the only thing that kind of irks customers at M&S. You say that tops the list. It gets the highest customer score, 78%, which is very decent indeed. Is that the reason why it's not a which recommended provider? Is it to do with that value for money?
Yeah, because of that value for money. Yeah, it gets a a relatively poor rating, and we can't make it a which recommended provider when it doesn't offer better value for money.
When it comes to which recommended providers for in-store supermarket performance, though, we have one.
Yeah, we do. Aldi. Yeah. It's our which recommended provider for in-store supermarkets. It comes joint second in our table. And it doesn't do as well as Marks and Spencer's in terms of all those metrics that I've talked about. You know, shoppers, the customer service isn't as good. The store appearance isn't as good. They don't like the self-scanning checkouts at Aldi. It does pretty well for value for money, though. So all of these things, however, don't put shoppers off because they love the value for money and they really are satisfied shopping there and would recommend it to their friends to shop there too.
So yeah, that's interesting. So it can tick almost all the boxes, but still get that WRP status despite kind of the couple of things that lets it down. I guess the other things pop it up a bit.
Yes,
enough.
exactly.
And then Lidl as well. I was looking because I was thinking, well, surely if Aldi gets the status, then Lidl does as well. But it's the queuing time at the checkout that just tips it a little bit below the threshold, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit. It just slightly underperforms on Aldi overall and on a couple of those metrics. So yeah, it's just not quite as good as Aldi, but it's very nearly there. And I have to say it's a really close contender, and it's hot on the heels of Aldi.
And also, just to quickly go back to M&S, one thing I just realised is that it's still top of the table despite the cyber attack that it suffered last year. That's quite remarkable. Did you think so as well? It
is quite remarkable. Yeah, I think it's quite remarkable in a number of ways. It's still top of the table despite the cyber attack, and after what's it been 3-4 years of cost of living crisis, and still a really premium supermarket is top of the table, which I think goes to show that there is a place for consumers kind of treating themselves and having luxury items and enjoying the slightly nicer side of shopping.
Yeah. Meanwhile, at the other end of the table for in-store, Morrison's 68%, bottom of the pile.
Bottom of the pile with Asda, yeah, jointly bottom of the pile for in-store shopping. Neither Morrison's nor Asda covers themselves with glory in terms of the kind of different metrics that we asked about. Poor ratings for customer service, not great for queues. And interestingly, we also asked about value for money, as I've talked about, but we split the rating this year for value for money for those people who are members of loyalty schemes and those people who aren't, because we thought there's quite a big difference in the price often that you pay at the checkout. Weirdly, with both Asda and Morrison's, the people who are members of its loyalty scheme rate it worse for value for money than the people that aren't.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting and was a real surprise to us when we were kind of sifting through the results of this survey. I think it might be a reflection of the fact that at the big players like Tesco and Sainsbury's, you're a member of the loyalty scheme and you get big discounts and you get to the checkout and there's a big chunk off your bill and people really feel like they're getting value from that, whereas they're obviously not feeling that at Asda and Morrison's. I mean, they will be getting some benefits from the loyalty scheme, but perhaps their expectations are they should be getting more. So perhaps that's where that rating comes from.
Yeah, I guess if you compare, I'm just trying to compare my experiences at least to try and put this into context, because when you go to Tesco, as you say, there's those Clubcard prices, but you also gain those points as well, and then you can redeem it for vouchers and whatnot. Whereas at Morrison's, I don't feel like there was as many member prices in store, and then I can never feel like I remember what happens with the points that I gain either. So I guess it's also just about the perceptions as well, isn't it? Like if you don't know what happens to the points, then you're kind of at a loss, really, aren't you?
Exactly that, and I think that's exactly what customers are finding.
And just quickly on Morrison's as well, because I picked out this this little bit that you wrote in the magazine. It was a quote from one of the somebody who's on the panel who gave some feedback. Somebody said for Morrison's, "It's dreadful, so expensive and badly stocked." I mean, it couldn't get much worse, could it? Really?
No,
it's such a shame.
No, it couldn't. I know. Yeah.
Should we talk about online supermarket performance now? There aren't as many players, I guess, for online. I guess partly because Aldi and Lidl don't offer that online shopping experience. I was going to say nothing on the radar to suggest they are going to, but there's fewer players at play here, isn't there?
Yeah, although there's a couple of extras here. So Ocado, which is an online-only supermarket, so that doesn't feature in our in-store table, and Amazon Fresh, which used to have some stores, but is now closing those stores, and it's just an online supermarket going forwards.
So top customer scores here, Tesco and Waitrose. So again, Tesco up there, but not getting that WRP status because of the Clubcard issue.
Yeah, same with Waitrose. Also, no WRP because of the issue with its loyalty prices.
So we go further down the list then, and we get to Ocado. So that's third on the list, and it is a WRP. Tell us why.
It is, yeah. Customers really like Ocado. They really like its customer service. They really like the range of its products, and they like the delivery that it offers, which obviously is very important for a online retailer. It offers a slightly different model, Ocado. So obviously there's no stores that you can go in. It has these huge warehouses. A lot of them are automated with kind of robots picking your groceries, and that well, Ocado would say at least that means that your groceries are more likely to be fresh. They come, they've got the range that they can pick from. It's not like somebody going around in store and elbowing out the normal shoppers to pick your online order. So it's got quite a different model, and it seems to work well.
Yeah, it's almost no surprise, really, not to sort of undermine all your research, but it's no surprise that Ocado is a WRP because it has no stores. It's been possibly, I guess, one of the founding players in the online supermarket business as well.
Well, it's certainly still the only online supermarket, not the only online, so the only pure player online supermarket that we have in the UK. Yeah. Other than Amazon Fresh, which is, I think, a slightly different model.
Yeah. And then, again, go down to the bottom of the table. Some familiar names here. Morrison's and Asda at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, Asda right at the bottom. Morrison's closely behind it.
What lets it down here? Is it the same value for money, or is it kind of other elements?
Yeah, choice and number of substitute items. Customers don't like those at Morrison's. They don't like the quality, or they rate poorly the quality of its own label products and fresh products. And everything else is kind of fairly mediocre, to be honest. There's nothing really stand out about them. They need to pull their socks up, really, and impress shoppers a bit more, I think.
They do. And hopefully this kind of research that you've done will kind of inspire them to do that, I hope. Do you think that'll happen? Will they get on with things?
Yeah, I mean, both of them have had kind of fairly well documented business issues this year, and they've had some stuff going on behind the scenes with their pricing, with their strategies, with their leadership team. So it will be interesting to see. I think they're both battling it out to try and inch their way back up in terms of market share and customer satisfaction.
Anything else from this that surprised you, apart from, I guess, the M&S cyber attack not having a dent in M&S?
I think another surprising thing, we asked shoppers about self-service checkouts and whether they prefer them to normal checkouts. And I have to say, I, for one, was certainly surprised by the result, which was that shoppers do prefer self-service checkouts to normal ones. And perhaps I was surprised by that because I don't like them.
You don't like shopping full stop?
No, I don't like shopping full stop, but I especially do not like self-service checkouts.
Why do you think that is then? I mean, why people aren't as offended by them as you kind of thought they would be?
I think that people have got used to the fact that they don't have to queue so much for them. So I think people have almost been forced into liking them because the queues for the normal checkouts are so long. So therefore, you don't have a whole load of choice. So it's kind of choosing between a rock and a hard place, isn't it? There's a really long queue at the normal checkout, so you prefer the self-service checkout. But my feeling is that if all things were equal, people would probably prefer a normal checkout with a normal person smiling and saying hello. Yeah, the manned tills are almost few and far between now because all that space has been taken up by self-service. The thing that bothers me about self-service is, when you buy an age-restricted product, whether it's alcohol or something, and then the amount of time you wait there for somebody to come over and, scan their little staff card just to approve it or whatever. Is anything, an age-restricted product, a product from the bakery, anything with some kind of voucher, like I get a subscription to the Sunday Times. Every time I try and buy the Sunday Times in a supermarket, they can't work out the coupon. If you've ever tried to do a self-service checkout with a toddler in tow, it's an absolute nightmare because they're shoving stuff in the bagging section when you don't want them to. They're scanning stuff repeatedly. It's a nightmare. So I don't think we're going to get more manned tills back. It doesn't look like that's the course of action. But if they could improve somehow, that would be good, wouldn't it? It would. What's next for you in terms of retail and research? Anything on the horizon? I guess the cheapest supermarket research for the month might be out soon. Yeah, we've got that out next week. Yep. We've also got some new research on food inflation coming out, and we've also hopefully got some some really new research on branded groceries and what the price of those looks like should be coming up soon.
Lovely stuff. Before you go, you mentioned the word inflation. We've all heard of shrinkflation as well, but also I read the word skimpflation in your piece. Remind me what that is. That's a new one.
Yes, skimpflation is where the quality of a product is reduced kind of on the sly and without a proportional price discount. So the big one that hit the headlines over the past few months was Club and Penguin bars. You know, the
chocolate
I was going to
biscuits.
say the chocolate bars,
Yeah.
but they're not actually chocolate bars. They're not made with, they can't be described as being made with chocolate anymore because of cuts in the amount of cocoa in them.
Gosh, I tell you, there's a lot to keep up with, isn't there? Thankfully, you're here to tell us and keep us on our toes. Ellie, brilliant. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.